Our scripture reading today is in the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 31 through 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats to his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you before the foundations of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me in. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hunger and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did to one of the least of these, who are the members of my family, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You who are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. I was naked, and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they will also answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger or naked or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer to them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do to one of the least of these, you did not do it unto me." And these will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life. With the story of the Good Samaritan close in memory, and these scriptures on our minds, Father God, I ask you to help us to hear your voice. I ask you to open up deaf ears and give us hearts of flesh, that your word might grow within us. Transform us this new year to be instruments of your peace to a heart-filled world. Amen. So today, I plan on speaking on two things. One is part of the ministry in the homeless part of the ministry that we do. And as you guys know, you guys have this loaves and fishes. Well, the ministry Lost and Found, back in September of last year, we started to go downtown and feed the homeless. So originally, there was one of the young people that comes to Lost and Found, and he kept begging me. He's like, "Come on, let's go out and do it. Let's go out and do it." And every week, I had an excuse. Couldn't do it because of this, the kids, somebody had a school function. And then finally came the day where I had nothing. Now, part of me didn't want to start this because I didn't want to just go downtown one time, feed some people, and come back home. I mean, it was such a drop in a bucket. It was a drop in a 55-gallon drum, honestly. But that Sunday came. We went down. We just made ham and cheese sandwiches, turkey sandwiches, and what we saw changed quite a few of us. We went to where these people live. We went to the dirty viaducts where they sleep, where they call home. We did a stop at Pacific Garden Mission, and there we seen just hundreds of people that were so happy just for a ham and cheese sandwich. So before we even got halfway through that day, I said, this is something that we have to continue doing. Maybe just through this winter, but we have to try to do this. So working here, I seen the hard workers in the kitchen making soup. All the days that I was here, I was just amazed at all of the help that would come in, chopping vegetables, making of the soup. And then, you guys actually inspired me to try to do soup. I said, hey, if they can do it, maybe I can try that. So the Lord has definitely blessed the ministry in keeping this soup going. We make 15 gallons every Tuesday, every Thursday. We head downtown, and we just try to find as many people as we can. Some of you know that recently, though, I went down for a week, and I actually lived downtown. Now, the police downtown have been telling the homeless people that in the wintertime that they could only have 3 blankets. So I came with my 3 blankets, and I said, hey, if this is really what the law is, I'm going to see if I can survive. And I can tell you for sure, 3 blankets were not enough. That was one of the most excruciating nights that I had ever had. I could not sleep at all, couldn't keep warm. I ended up going on to the Red Line, and if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's the little train system downtown that goes from 95th Street up to Howard. And basically at nighttime, they let the homeless people stay on there to keep warm. Now, it sounds like it's a nice thing, but it's miserable. That was just, have you guys ever seen the movie Groundhog's Day? Where the guy keeps waking up and keeps waking up to the exact same thing? That's pretty much how it is, because you go from 95th Street, the doors open, all the cold air comes in, you got to transfer over to another train, and then every stop down the line, doors are opening, cold air comes in, doors closing, and once all the customers are gone and it's just the homeless people, the train is rocking side to side. It's going so fast that from 95th Street to Howard, they do it in 45 minutes with stops. So I don't know how these people were sleeping, but I noticed something. They were all sick. It was so sad. The first week, that's all I could say. When somebody came to me and said, hey, how was it? It was so sad. So all these sick people were on this train, coughing, sneezing. People are getting aggravated, because people keep coughing and waking them up. But they're all in the same boat. So that inspired me I had this crazy idea. I'm going to be down here all week. So I put it out on the Facebook that, hey, if anybody can come together and bring cough drops, cough medicine, Kleenexes, some kind of snacks, water, juices, whatever we got, bring it together. So I had my team that comes down on Tuesday. They brought me some stuff. On Thursday, they brought me some more stuff. I had one of the pastors that I'm connected with in the suburbs. He brought out a big old bag of cough drops. And then me and a homeless guy rode the blue line all night one day, rode the red line night, and just passed out as much as we could. And it was amazing that if I didn't have that first night where I froze to death, I would have never have known what went on the train system. I just had this brief memory of somebody saying to me, well, hey, if you get cold, go hop on the train. They'll let you sleep there. And so with that in mind, that's what sparked it. So, whoever it was that told me, wish I could remember because I would thank them. Because then that opened up a whole new avenue to go and administer to these people. So I'm going to read some verses. Now, these all come from the scriptures, new and old. And they all have to do with what God is commanding us as believers. Because one of the things is that, the word church, okay? Some of you who may speak German know that that word comes from the Germanic. Martin Luther's influence on the Bible, gave us the word church. And now we have this love affair with brick and mortar. But if you take that word church and you go back in time to the Greek where it came from, And through the transliteration, what we find is that there's a word called ecclesia. It's a compound word of two. Ek, the called, or out called, and then the kalsia, that part is the ones being called. So literally, it was a word that meant the out-called ones. And we, the church, are the out-called ones to be separate from the world and different from the world so that the world sees us and they come to us and they ask, why are you different? We don't have to, go around and always be proclaiming, because our actions can proclaim the gospel to people. There was a missionary, I think it was Tyndale, and he had said, witness wherever you go, but use words when necessary. So, Proverbs 19:17. One who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. 1 John 3:17. But whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? And that verse actually brings another verse to memory. I don't have it on here, but it's 1 John chapter 2. It says that if anyone says that Christ abides in them, they are to walk even as he has walked. So if I say, Christ lives within inside of me, you should see Christ in the walk of my Christian faith. And if you don't, I'm doing something wrong. Deuteronomy 15:11. For the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy, and to the poor in your land. Proverbs 29:7. The righteous is concerned for the rights of the poor, but the wicked, they do not understand such things. Proverbs 21:13. Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. Now that really strikes, that when we cry out to God, that if we've shut our ears to those that are crying out for help around us, and we pretend like they're not there, God is going to do the same to us. Now, what a terrible thing to experience. Now, when I was downtown, for the first 3 days, I was trying to pass out these flyers that had just statistics about homelessness. I also had the poster that's outside of the narthex. I had the poster sitting next to me. In fact, there's a picture poster. I had all my bags, and I just stood in the pedway, which is an underground tunnel system, and just trying to pass out flyers. Now, obviously, I looked like a homeless person, so I got kicked out of places a lot, even though I had no reason to be kicked out. I wasn't soliciting. I wasn't asking for donations. I wasn't even asking people to sign up for anything. I was just passing out information. But because of the way I looked, nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And in those 3 days, I passed out 4 flyers. Just 4. So then I had an idea, posted it on Facebook. Hey, can I get some of the lost and found people? These young 20s. Come downtown, dressed up. Pass these out with me. So Mary was one of the people that came. This girl grabs a stack of them. We all met up at the Burger King down in the train station. She grabs a stack of them. She just walks right outside the door. She starts passing them out. I grab my bags, and I walk up to her, and I'm like, how many of you passed out? And she's like, more than 4. Within about 2 hours, we had passed out 250. And it was just amazing the difference that I was completely invisible when I looked like I was homeless. In fact, in those few days, I had friends of mine that I had been in school with since kindergarten that I'm still friends with on Facebook that must not have known I was doing this. Because, if you've ever seen the crowd of people coming off the train, I was just standing off to the side, and then all of a sudden they looked. And then they were just like that, and they kept walking. 3 times that happened to me. 3 people that I knew since kindergarten just walked right past an old friend that for all they knew was homeless. That was a little heartbreaking, I will admit. But on Tuesday, I was there from 7:30 till 9 o'clock. And in that whole time, I was saying, Merry Christmas. I hope you have a good day. How are you today? All these, just little general niceties. Not a single person returned even a hello. And after all the crowds kind of dissipated around 10 o'clock, I picked up my stuff. I went back to the little street corner I was sleeping on. And it was amazing, the pain. Because I'm a very social person. I don't very often, get somebody that doesn't say hello back or return a smile. Not even a smile. If I smiled, nobody returned even a smile. And that doesn't cost anything. It doesn't even cost barely any energy. And in fact, you smile, it releases endorphins. You feel better if you smile. But they purposely didn't even smile, wouldn't even look in my direction. I remembered a day when we had came down and we were doing our normal route. There's this young man. His name was Dodd was his last name. Drawing a blank on his first. Melvin Dodd. So really nice guy, really pleasant and outgoing. Well, we pull up and I hop out of the truck and I'm like, what's happening, Melvin? How are you today? He just starts crying. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. So I go running over to him and I, give him a hug and I'm like, man, brother, what is wrong? What is going on? And he says, no one has talked to me for 3 days. But yet I looked in any direction, I could see homeless people. And not even them. No one connected with this young man. Thankfully, through lots of prayers and help from people, we got him some boots. He ended up getting a job with Metra. Haven't seen him since. Last I heard, he had his own apartment. So hopefully, I don't see him again for his good. Me, I'd love to see him again just because, but under better circumstances. Not in the sense that we first met him. So on the first day, remember how I said that I couldn't find anywhere to, any way to keep warm. Well, during the day, one of my goals when I went down there was to search the streets and try to find homeless people and new communities that we could, help go and find and bring food to, bring clothing, whatever they needed. Well, I walked down every single street and alley in Chinatown. Now, it had just snowed before I went. There was not a single place to sit. There was not a single place to rest. And I just walked all day long, 8 to 9 hours through Chinatown, trying to find one little dry spot that I could just put my bags down, but couldn't find anything. I did stop at Walgreens, and I was there for about 3 minutes before security came out. Said, hey, you can't be here. I'm like, really? At that point, I actually did want to cry. I was so exhausted, I was so tired. I ended up grabbing all my bags, I went inside, and I bought some water, hoping that maybe since I bought some water, I could just stand down at the end of this building and not be hassled. And with that, I was able to drink that bottle of water, and then I moved on, trying to find a place that I was going to sleep that night. So with the homeless people, it's a whole nother world that first day, I wanted to give up. I wanted to go back home. I didn't want to do it anymore. I thought there was no way that I would never make it till Friday. But that whole time I was walking, I remembered this verse that Jesus had said, where he said that foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And I thought for 3 years of his ministry, at least the part that we know about him, when he comes into his ministry, that he didn't have a home. He was a homeless man, wandering around with 12 friends. Now, obviously, sometimes they stayed at somebody's house, but for the most part, he was a homeless guy. Now, someone else that's homeless in the Bible that we don't really think about was John the Baptist. Now, in the Eastern Orthodox faith, they have a story that most of Christianity has never heard about this. You guys know about Zechariah, the miracle birth of John the Baptist, okay? So, he is blinded, or I'm sorry, not blind. He is he was made not to be able to speak, and he's also made deaf, okay? Now, that's in our scriptures. If you carefully read, when they ask, the mother, what's the name of the child to be? And she says, John. And they say, no, that can't be. There's no John in your family. So they go to ask the father. And they ask him by giving him signs. They sign to him. And so again, you can look in many different commentaries. The idea is that he was also made deaf. So not only could he not speak, he was also deaf. So all of a sudden, when he writes, his name will be called John, he can speak again. And everybody's, what manner of child is this? This was like a miracle. One, they were so old that nobody could believe that they were having a child. And then this miracle showed forth. So then, a couple years later, when the wise men from the east, the Magi, come into town, they're looking for this new king being born. Who do you think is number one on that hit list of Herod? Well, they go after John. Now again, like I said, this is also in one of the apocryphal texts, but this is also in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So Herod sends out his guards to go and find this child that was this miracle baby, and they go to his home, Zechariah and Elizabeth's home, and they couldn't find anybody, so they go to Zechariah at the temple where he was doing his service. I think it's in chapter 22 of Matthew. Jesus is kind of rebuking the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And in this rebuke, he says that all of the righteous blood from Abraham to Zechariah will fall upon you, this generation. And wow, Zechariah, who's that? It doesn't quite fit with the Zechariah that was killed back in 2 Chronicles. But now with this story added into the mix, and what it continues is that these guards from Herod came and said, "Where is your son?" Zechariah said, "He's at home with his mother." And so the guards had already been there. They knew that he wasn't there. And they demanded, "Where is the son?" And when Zechariah wouldn't tell, because he had told Elizabeth, "Go out into the wilderness, take the boy, flee," the guards killed him between the altar and the temple. And that's where we pick up in the story with Jesus, where that was a relative of his too. So John the Baptist now is out in the wilderness, hiding out from Herod with his mother. And according to the Eastern Orthodox tradition, that by the time he was 8 years old, his mother had passed away. And so from the time of 8 to 30, when Jesus comes into the scene and we first hear about John the Baptist baptizing people along the water, he lived on his own, eating locusts, honey, camel skin for clothing. Now, if you've seen that little boy who, got beat up, that was my son, and he's 9. I can't imagine a little boy that young living in the wilderness by himself. But there's another person that was homeless from the scriptures. Now we have these pastors today that are preaching this health and wealth gospel, saying that the more you give to God, that the more you're going to get back. There was a time when I was looking for a church, I had gone to a church not too far from here, and one of the things that the pastor had said was that the more you give, the better chance you have that God is going to bless you. And today, we're giving away a car. I happened to sit right next to this lady who said, "Oh, I need that car so bad." Well, they did 3 offerings. On the 3rd offering, this woman took her entire paycheck and put it into literally a KFC bucket, and in the hope that God was going to bless her with a car. She did. But that was so sad that we have this in Christianity as something that people can go and say, "This is Christianity? I don't have anything to do with this." It seems more like a scam. So, that makes it harder for us that when we go out into the world, that we really have to be that ecclesia, the outcalled ones, that are different and separate from the world. So, lastly, stewardship. 3 points. Not very much. I could literally probably teach on stewardship for days. There's so many facets to it. But in a nutshell, 1 point of stewardship is ownership. In Psalm 24, verse 1, the psalmist starts out, "The earth is the Lord's and all that it contains, the world and all those who dwell in it." So everything is the Lord's. Everything. Deuteronomy 8:11. "Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his ordinances and his statutes, which I am commanding you today." Now I'm going to skip down to verse 17. "Otherwise, you may say in your heart, my power and my strength, the strength of my hand has made me this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for he is who is giving you the power to make wealth, and he may confirm his covenant which he swore to your fathers this day." So I can tell you from my personal experience, there was a time where I had become very proud. Now, I was a Christian. I was always passing out the little Gideon Bibles every time I went to a job site. I was a surveyor for like 20 years. Every time I went to a job site, every porta potty I'd hit up, and I put these little Gideon Bibles in there. All the people knew basically when something went down, Robert was the guy to talk to if it had anything to do with the spiritual stuff. Okay, if you had to talk about anything naughty, you usually kind of stayed away from me. Okay, so I had grown in my pride to the point where I thought I was really somebody. I had a client that had flown me in a helicopter to go have a meeting with Rod Blagojevich on one of our projects. And so driving home, I'm coming back in my big brand new Sierra truck, and I was smoking this fancy handmade cigarette from New York. And as I ashed out the window, I looked at my hand, and this fool actually said, "Look what my hands have done." What a fool. Within 6 months, I was standing at a church, waiting for them to unlock the back doors so I could get a bag of groceries. Just like King Nebuchadnezzar, the Lord cut me down, taught me a very valuable lesson about who is the true owner of everything. So now, I fully understand that whatever I have, it's not really mine. I'm a steward of that gift. How I use that gift is now going to be how my relationship is with God. So if I'm a selfish person, when I get a gift, I'm going to think it's all about me. Or if I'm trying to walk in the statutes of the Lord, when I receive a gift, I go, what can I do with this gift that is going to further the kingdom? What can I do with this gift that might win more souls to Christ? And so my focus now has changed in that stewardship act. So point one, God already owns everything that we have. If anyone has ever read C.S. Lewis, I don't know if there's some people that don't like him, but if you've ever read the book Mere Christianity, he has a quote in there that every faculty that we have, the power of our thinking to moving the limbs from moment to moment, is given to us by God. If you devoted every moment of your whole entire life exclusively to God's service, you could not give him anything that was not, in a sense, already his. And that, when I was a little boy, it was Christmas time. I didn't know how Christmas presents worked. I was probably a kindergartner. Well, my dad, my mom, my sisters all had something in the house that they really liked that was very special to them. Well, what did I do? I knew that was special to them, so I took it, wrapped it up, and I put it in this little brown bucket until Christmas. So they're all looking for all this stuff that's disappeared because I had wrapped up all the things that they really liked and put it into a bucket. And they didn't get it until Christmas. So Christmas morning comes, and I can remember my mom very vividly. oh, I wondered where this went. Every present she opened. But that's kind of like the stewardship thing with God. Everything's already his, and for us to wrap it up and try to give it to him, it's already his. So, just kind of a funny little story. All right, point number 2, responsibility and accountability. Deuteronomy 16:16 and 17. 3 times a year all the males shall appear before the Lord to a place that he chooses. Now catch that, he chooses. The feast of unleavened bread, let me skip on to the last verse. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessings that the Lord your God has given him. So now I'm not saying that we're only supposed to give 3 times a year. That had to do with the cycle of the harvest times. They were bringing grain offerings, the first fruit offerings, the barley offerings. For us, it's wherever we get our sustenance from the work that we do or for whatever it is, that's our time to give back to the Lord. Now, God doesn't need our money. He can do it without it. But like I said earlier, how we give is a reflection of our relationship with God. Deuteronomy 15:7. If there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers, and in any of your towns in the land which your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand from your poor brother, but you should freely open your hand to him, and shall generously lend to him sufficiently for whatever he needs. It's kind of neat that in the Jewish tradition, that when it comes time for the Passover dinner, that if there's a poor family, or even if you're at the grocery store shopping, and you see that there's somebody struggling to get all the things that they need for the Passover, it is an obligation that they will just automatically go over, see what they need, go to the store. Well, they're at the store, but they'll go to the aisles that they need, find the things that they need, buy it for them, and put it in their bag. That's this law of Moses. There's this old story that Gamaliel and Paul were talking, and somebody comes up to him and asks for a donation for some money. Paul gives it to him, and then Gamaliel says, "Good, you follow the law of Moses." And Paul says to him, "Yes, but what do I do when all my money is gone?" And Gamaliel, now this may be just fictitious, but Gamaliel says to him, "You will then live by the law of Moses, and those who live by the law of Moses will feed you." What an amazing way to view life. Now I know that that's just so far extreme that none of us would ever even go there, but it's kind of a neat story on the idea of how the Jewish people think about giving. So, point number 2 is that we have a responsibility and an accountability to give to God. And when we sail into glory, one of these days, we all will, we'll have to give an account for those gifts that we either gave or did not give. Okay, and thirdly, going to the story of the parable of the talents, okay? Do you remember how at the end, when the master came back, that they were all given a reward except for the one who had buried it, okay? So the third point with stewardship is that there is a reward at the end. The faithful steward who did the master's will, they got good and faithful servant. Enter into my happiness. The one who didn't, slothful servant, evil, wicked servant. We should all be desiring to hear that one day that we were a good and faithful servant to the Lord. In Luke 6, chapter 30, give everyone who asks of you. But more literally, because I don't want you to get turned off by that idea, more literally, if you go into the Greek, it is that Christ is looking for us to be in the habit of being a giver, okay? In the book of Leviticus, there's 2 places where God tells them that when you pick all your grapes, don't pick them all, and don't pick up anything that falls to the ground. Leave that for the poor, for the widow, for the stranger. He also tells them to do the same thing with their fields, to not cut the corners of your fields. Leave that for the others. So it's interesting that in the Old Testament, that the way God had this set up was that they would simply not do something in order to take care of the poor, the widow, the fatherless. Now, in our day and age, in the New Testament, Christ wants to work through us. We are the hands and feet of him in the world. So now in the Old Testament, you just had to not do something. In the New Testament, we have to go out to people who need. We have to go out and be that face of Christ to others. And when we are serving, we should see the face of Christ in those that we serve. So it's stewardship. It's a very important thing. I can remember one time when I had a pastor teaching about this in Sunday, that a man actually got up. I was a sophomore in high school, and I still remember this. A man actually got up about 10 verses or 10 lines into his sermon about stewardship and tithing. And this man got up and just walked right out. I never seen him come back to that church again. I was absolutely amazed. I wondered why. And since then, I've studied stewardship. I encourage you all to study stewardship, because there's been a lot of things in the church world that have gone against what God actually says about how stewardship is to be done. Okay, we're going to pray. I'll do a general prayer for all of us gathered here today for this coming year, and then if you would join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Heavenly Father, I ask you, Lord, for your guidance in this next coming year. I ask you, Lord, to open up doorways and opportunities that we can be your hands and your feet to this world. I ask you, Lord, for your light to shine and radiate through our lives in this world, that people see that we are different, and they come and ask us, why are you different? And that at that point we can share the gospel with you, Lord. Lord, for anyone who needs healing, you are the one that can heal. For those who need help through this life, through hard times and hardships, Lord, I ask you to please walk beside them, be with them, find people to bring into their lives that might be able to help to carry any burdens or just to be a friendly ear. I ask you, Lord, to please help every one of us with our faith walk with you, to stretch those faith muscles that we might be able to grow closer and stronger in the faith. Let us now join together in the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. It's time for our offering. So this is the time that we respond to the teachings. One of the verses that I often teach my young people is Galatians 6, verse 6. And it says that to him that has been taught, that in that we owe a debt to the teacher or to Westminster. And this place is such a phenomenal church. All the different things that this church reaches out to the community to help, all the opportunities that they give for us to come and learn, the teachers that they bring in, these are all things that we owe a debt to this ministry. So in Galatians 6:6, it says that to those who are taught, that you must share all good things. Okay, and that word all is panta, all, everything included. If you see somewhere where the church is lacking, we're to help out, we're to give. So if the ushers will come forward.